So we're going to get started. My name is Heather Trim. I'm with Zero Waste Washington, although when I did this work, I was with FutureWise, and before that I was with people from Puget Sound. I think Christina's going to. Did you want to say something? Okay. Yeah, she's going to do this.
So good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Christina McGinnis. I work with the Washington State Department of Ecology, and we are at the session today to make sure you all know you're in the right room. We're talking about stormwater and ways to inspire people. And so this work by Heather Trim and by Betsy Adams. Betsy, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, I'm Betsy Adams. I'm with the City of Kirkland.
So this project today, we're talking in order to reduce our water pollution and excess flow problems associated with stormwater, the Stormwater Outreach for Regional Municipalities, the STORM group, in partnership with nonprofits and other agency staff, conducted a research project to improve the language and the messaging used to describe stormwater, and with a special focus on low-impact development and green infrastructure. And this research project used modified social marketing approach to look at words and messaging used to convey awareness and action to the public. And so the goal was to examine and question previous assumptions about stormwater messaging to develop high-impact, effective messaging that can be used consistently by all throughout the region. And then there were some surprising and interesting results that they're going to get into. So thank you for coming today.
Cool, thank you. So to emphasize, this was definitely a joint effort of a lot of people who are in the room. So it was Storm, it was people who are from the EcoNet, so it was a large number of people who worked on this project. And last fall, I did a little quick web search of the language that the public sees. So this is public-facing text taken from websites not in Washington State, but very similar to what's in Washington State, so we didn't want to point the finger of anyone. But this is what the public is reading. Storm drains, separated sewer pipes, surface runoff, swales, discharge, etc. Or municipal separated storm sewer systems. Urbanized areas contribute pollutants, impervious surfaces, water bodies, hydrologic changes. This is public-facing for the public language. And then, this is my favorite. This is the definition of a watershed. Watersheds are everywhere. They are, but does that tell you what a watershed is? So the problem we have is that a lot of the language that is being used to describe stormwater and rainwater to the public is based on the language that was from the engineering and the permitting in the NPDES permits from 30 years ago. And the public doesn't experience, this is how we may think of it in terms of conveyance, et cetera, but the public experiences rain as a natural thing. And in doing this research, we wanted to figure out what is the best wording to use to the public about this so that they would take action or care about it. And so it was interesting because we really started it with not knowing anything, and this is one of the conclusions, is go more natural. We didn't actually have that conclusion from the beginning. So the what the what of the project is that we wanted to improve the wording that we use related to stormwater for the public, and we did a particular emphasis on green infrastructure. And the funders for this project were the Boeing Company, the Rose Foundation, and the Nature Conservancy.
And so the who of the project, so as Heather alluded to, this was definitely a joint effort of many different groups and concerns. So we had storm jurisdictions, we had lots of nonprofits, we had people from ecology that participated in the work group, and also consulting firms. And the purpose of the project was three-pronged. The first purpose was to create plain language descriptions of stormwater processes, infrastructure, and LID structures. The second purpose was to create messaging frames to tell the stormwater story that inspire action and raise awareness. We were trying to create messaging frames that our audience could relate to. And lastly, we realized that this really was just the first phase in sort of an ongoing effort. We wanted to create a foundation for future research into multicultural outreach. And so this outlines the project process that we followed. The first element that we did was a needs assessment. We looked into research that already existed in messaging. There wasn't a whole lot out there for us to start with. We went through and did a a process trying to figure out sort of a starting base. So we realized that we wanted to use metaphors as a way to help explain pretty complex processes of stormwater in ways that our audience could understand. We developed some preliminary metaphors and preliminary messaging that we would be testing. And then we took that, the messages that we came up and tested them in focus groups, both in English and in Spanish. And then from there refined our messaging and finally did some final testing via online surveys. This is Jetpack.
You got to be humorous, right, when you talk about things. Okay, so the first really significant finding we had from this work is that the public does not understand the word stormwater. We all use that term, but they don't know what that means. They think of that as totally differently than the way we might think of it. And really, rainwater is what they think of. So we did a bunch of focus groups, as Betsy mentioned, and to many of the focus groups in their discussion, the concept of stormwater meant something being conveyed away. It did not mean sort of all the other parts of stormwater that we think of in terms of how you might address it, et cetera, on site, et cetera. These are some of the quotes from the focus group. This is about what is the word stormwater. That is the retained water. Rainwater is, for me, what falls when it rains, which is not the same as stormwater. Stormwater can directly go into the river, but other water can go to the trees. So you can see there's just a lot of confusion about this, and we recommend using the word rainwater a lot more than the word stormwater when you're talking to the public. The other interesting thing is that we said, what is Puget Sound? And in the focus groups, the response was not universally that it is a water body. They thought that some of our audience thinks that it might be a place. And part of the reason we think that's the case is because you have all these things where Puget Sound is used as a geographic thing, so like Puget Sound Energy. So not a water body, but a place, and this was particularly true in the Spanish language focus groups. This is a bit of a problem since we have a campaign called Puget Sound Starts Here. So we really need to message that Puget Sound is a water body, not just like we live in the Tri-City area, which is the way some people are experiencing it. Then we tested 18 different commonly used terms that are on all these websites and are all our presentations right now. And almost every single one was tested very poorly. Green infrastructure, these are some examples, low impact development, bioretention, bioswale, watershed. People did not know what these terms mean at all. But what is really good news is we thought the term rain garden would maybe be a bad term. We weren't sure. We went into it thinking we don't know if rain garden is a good term or bad term to use, and some people thought that the term rain garden was a bad term to use. And what we found is that it actually works as a term. It works if it's intuitive to people, if you define it a little bit for them. So it's intuitive what a rain garden is, which is super great news for those who are trying to promote rain gardens, as long as you add what it is as you're trying to explain it to people. These are some of the quotes from the focus group when asked, what is a rain garden? They are gardens that feed on rainwater. Pretty intuitive. Because it is something more natural. Captures the rainwater, and that's what it uses to feed the plants. And these are people who really didn't know what a rain garden is. They're just telling us what they think it is. So this is pretty good. So we got that intuitive feel for it. Rain as a thing, is it something that people like? And that is really important for us to think about because we always are kind of framing stormwater in a negative, like we got to deal with stormwater, but in fact, if you like rain, and we can turn this into a positive, and use the term rain in some of these more natural terms. So there were some negative ones, though, like in the focus groups, like driving in wet conditions. What does rain mean to you? Driving in wet conditions is dangerous. But basically, it's viewed as life, and the terms people use were quite heartwarming, life-giving and replenishing. Rain represents that the green is coming and that life will be reborn. It makes everything green. That is why it's so pretty here. So this is really good also for us to know when we're doing our outreach and our messaging. So as part of what we did, we wanted to come up with framing value. So this was a modified social marketing approach. Some of you were in the social marketing workshop yesterday. So we did not do a full-on, all the way to the end, social marketing campaign. This was work to be used by others when they're doing social marketing work in the future. But we did want to come up with some of the values that could then be used if people are doing the promotion, the P promotion or messaging in future efforts. So for our Spanish language audience, we found that the highest values were family, cleanliness of the area, quote from the focus group, clean water and the clean air, why they like living here. The abundance of water. Sometimes one takes for granted the abundance of water in the lakes and rivers. Economic opportunities and the greenness of the area. I really like this place because it's what you do not see in Mexico anymore. It is very green. So this was in the focus group asking the questions of why do you like living in the Pacific Northwest? In the general audience, we found greenness of the area. What I really like is the green, the trees here, and that there is pockets of them everywhere. Economic opportunities, the people, a lot of very positive comments about the people, and easy access to outdoor recreational activities. I love hiking here. Mountain biking is amazing, but I think that maybe the best thing about living here is the people, the open-minded people that live in this area. So people have very positive things about living here, and these are the kinds of frames that could be used when you develop messaging. And now I'll turn it back.
Okay, so as part of the project, as I said before, we were working on metaphors, and we worked with the focus groups to develop metaphors and framing of the metaphors that would make sense to them. So these are the concepts that they came up with. So filtering keeps you healthy, talking about Mother Earth and her kidneys sort of as a way to filter water, the metaphor of a rain garden acting as a filter, cleaning rainwater. And we had Spanish language versions for all these, and we commissioned a couple artists to create images that are open source, available for all to use freely. Sponge it up, soil acting as a sponge, just conveying it through images that are more artistic and are friendly for people to look at. Path of stormwater. So we talked through with our focus groups again, trying to figure out what sort of messaging, how we could explain how stormwater gets from your house to the storm drain to our creeks and lakes, and what language would make sense to them. The process of picking up pollution, again, not using the word stormwater, using pretty much everyday terminology to explain these concepts. And all the messaging that we came up with, the metaphors, the artwork, open source photos are all in a toolkit that's available on the resource reservoir, Storms Resource Reservoir. And I have little cards that have a link to the toolkit that you can pick up after. Okay. And here's just some examples of what you can find in the toolkit. So this is, when you open the page, this is what you come to, and it has links to all the different materials. So it has messaging recommendations. It has this PowerPoint that you can use to explain why, maybe to your leadership, why you want to be using different terminology beyond the technical lingo. And on there you'll find copies of the research reports. It has reports from the focus groups. It has our needs assessment. You'll find example fact sheets. These are completely editable. So this is a fact sheet that we put together, just very basic introduction into rainwater and the process of rainwater moving through the system. And again, all these images are open source and can be used by you. Like I said, a couple sets of PowerPoint slides. Messaging and communication tips, sort of our takeaways from the research that we did, how we would recommend maybe modifying your website, different framing that you can use when talking about stormwater with the general audience. There are multiple images, both drawings and photos on the website. Again, all available for everybody to use. Just some examples. And this was something that we found out, is that nobody really has a good picture of gutters and downspouts. So this is just a generic gutter and downspout, if you're starting, where does stormwater start? The storm drain in the street. Then, just images of people working in rain gardens. I sort of did a call out to storm members looking for photos that we could include in the toolkit. If you have additional photos, please send them my way and I'll add them. They're all live on a Flickr page. Diagrams of rain gardens, wet rain gardens, dry rain gardens in the street, rain gardens in people's yards, rain barrels. And as Heather alluded to before, nobody really knows what a watershed is, and it can be a hard thing to explain. There aren't really great images out there. So we had an artist draw one for us, a very simple idea of what a rain garden is, or watershed. And so in conclusion, we created a big body of materials, and really this just is a sample of what was put together in the social science results. As you all probably know already, the existing language that we're using is way too jargon rich, and in order for the public to really understand what we're talking about, to involve the public in these efforts, which we really need to do, we need to be using plain language and talking about rainwater, not stormwater, referring back to natural processes and what people appreciate about rainwater. And please take a look at the toolkit. All the materials are there. And just remember, the language that we came up around stormwater was really developed to explain gray infrastructure and to describe, oh, it moved on its own. But what we need to be moving more towards is how the public experiences rainwater, how they interact with the environment, and get back to nature. Thank you.
I just want to add one more thing, and that is that what we've heard is that senior management, and maybe some of you are in the room, are very reluctant to allow the changing of words to words like this. And that's why one of the PowerPoints is designed for you to give to your senior management, for you to deliver to them and say, this is the tested results of how this wording will work better than the wording you use. And for example, ecology right now, when they give out grants, and I know there's a lot of ecology people in the room right now, when you're putting in a rain garden, or a bioretention cell, you're not allowed to say the more natural words. You have to, on your sign, use these more formal, jargony words. So we want to change that. So we want you guys to go up the chain and get your managers, who may have, come from the old school stuff, to change to this new, to let you change to this new language. Anyway, any questions?